Industrial and commercial electrical done right. This is Casey Hendrickson on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's News Channel, your breaking news and weather station.
And good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's News Channel. I am your host, Casey Hendrickson. Do want to thank you all for listening and for tuning in. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Also want to thank R&B Car Company, locations in South Bend and Warsaw. R&B Car Company are your used car experts. All right, MSNBC and a bunch of other blue checkmark brigaders out there on social media over the weekend went with the white male, white supremacist, white nationalist, hate crime scenario when it came to the Capitol attack that happened over the weekend, which, of course, they do every single time. This is the thing. When we talk about these stories, you have to understand something. There is zero shame on leftists' personality. They don't care. They just do not care if they lie to you. It's part of their doctrine. None of their base is going to fault them for lying because it's okay to lie. We pointed out numerous times that a lot of times these groups that supported Biden who are now upset with Biden, they're upset with Biden because they thought that he was lying to everybody, that he was really on their side, like the pro-life Democrats, who are all of a sudden, they are really perplexed that Joe Biden is not pro-life. They don't understand this. And even though he was out there saying that he wasn't pro-life, and he was advocating for essentially abortion on demand, he got caught in that corner a couple of times during the campaign, they just assumed that he was lying in order to get votes and that he really wasn't pro-abortion. And now they're looking around going, he was telling the truth. He deceived us. Now imagine the logic that you have in your head and how warped your political personas have to be to assume that somebody is lying to you and therefore just inferring that they believe in the opposite and still support that person. I mean, that's a really bizarre philosophy to have, but this is very commonplace on the political left. It does happen on the right sometimes, but very commonplace on the political left, where their politicians are so known for lying and deceiving the public and then doing the exact opposite when they get in office that they just assume whatever they say, the opposite is true, and therefore we can still support them. Very strange stuff. He told the truth, and therefore he deceived us. That's essentially their argument. It's also another reason why the media and a lot of people in this country didn't really know how to handle Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was doing exactly what he promised. And there's just been a long time since we have had a politician do what they promised they were going to do. And again, he had a lot of pushback against that stuff, but at least he was trying to do exactly what he told his voters he was going to do. So MSNBC and a bunch of others went out there and said, white male, white nationalist. A lot of them even admitted that they had absolutely no information about the attack whatsoever. Now, of course, it is not a white nationalist. It's not a white guy at all. In fact, it's a black Muslim guy. Well, I say Muslim loosely because he's a Nation of Islam acolyte. And the Nation of Islam is often shunned by the Muslim community, kind of like the Westboro Baptist Church is shunned by Christendom. So that's who this guy is. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams reported on the death of the suspect, who is still at the time unidentified. Did get to see some actual footage of him being wheeled out as he was dying on the gurney. The question now is, what's the condition of the Capitol police officers who were injured when the man were told it was a white male that was driving the car when the man got out of the car and attacked the police officers with a knife? One of those officers is dead, by the way. The suspect was later identified as Noah Green, 25-year-old black man from Indiana, who was clearly not a white male. He's not even light-skinned, okay? So he's not easily confused with being white. This is just what ends up happening when people go with a race over substance narrative. They do this all the time. And the thing that is, again, because of this culture of they lie all the time, we lie all the time, it's how we do things, therefore it's all about advancing our side over the other side. The other side's evil, so we'll just lie, and it doesn't really matter. Most of you in this audience, if you get caught lying, you're really embarrassed. If you're wrong about something, you're embarrassed. But if you get caught lying, you're really, really embarrassed. And it'll probably eat at you for quite some time. They do not have that mechanism in their being at all. It doesn't exist. If it did, Adam Schiff wouldn't be able to show his face in public. Neither would Schumer, neither would Pelosi, neither would most of your cable news anchors on MSNBC and CNN. They just wouldn't, many on Fox, they just would not be able to come out and actually show their face. If Chris Wallace had a shred of integrity, he would be embarrassed. He would have been groveling at the audience's feet the very next day when he came on his show and he said, when he should have said, I am so sorry, I got lazy and I didn't read the Georgia election law. And the Georgia election law does not in any way forbid drinking water. And I was wrong about that, and I'm so sorry. I am embarrassed. A normal human being with integrity would have that reaction. Chris Wallace doesn't. He's still repeating the lie. So is Biden. So is Schumer. So is Pelosi. So is everybody else on the left. They're repeating these lies about Georgia. They're repeating these lies about the election in November. They're just repeating these lies over and over again, and they're not at all embarrassed by it, even though they've been caught. None of them have buried their head in the sand and disappeared from public life after Trump-Russia collusion. They just aren't embarrassed. It is okay. And it's not even, honestly, this is it's sociopathic behavior that you can lie like that. If you were to go into, a clinical psychiatrist's office and ask them about this stuff, they would say if they were honest, again, they would say, yeah, psychopathy. So you have this real problem with people who are information givers to lie to you with impunity and not feel embarrassed about it. The other thing that gets me, though, is the people who are deceived by them, the acolytes, the ones that go out there and repeat the lie that has just been given to them because they believed it. Chris Wallace and Rachel Maddow and everybody else, they go out there and they're trying to prevent you from drinking water, a basic human right, water, while you stand in line to vote. So everybody runs out and goes, wow, that's inhumane. And then once they find out that Wallace and Maddow and everybody else lied about that, they're not angry at them. They still defend them, and they still push more false narratives. It just move on. Well, the water is irrelevant. It's this other thing. Well, that's wrong too. Well, that's irrelevant. It's this other thing. Well, that's wrong too. Oh, it's this other thing now. There is no shame. And how many times have they done this with guns and shootings and suspects over and over and over and over again? The interesting thing about this is that when the political right, when we were having an issue with Islamic terrorism in this country, the political right was almost always able to correctly call that, whereas the political left is almost always wrong at what they say about a mass public shooting. Almost always. Most mass public shooters are not on the political right. They're mostly on the political left, or they're apolitical. They don't use AR-15s most of the time. There aren't more mass shootings now than there ever have been. These are all lies that get repeated over and over and over and over again. The suspect is white. White males do this more than everybody else disproportionately. All of those things are demonstrably untrue. But they repeat the lie. And then in a couple of months, when it happens again, they'll repeat those lies again, even though those very same people were debunked on it the last time, because they have no shame. And just as we talked about the Orange County shooting last week, you said how you knew instantly that this wasn't a white shooter. You had a mass public shooting, 4 people dead, including a 9-year-old boy. Perfect fodder for a media firestorm. But there wasn't one. And the thing is that you know that there isn't a public firestorm over it because of one thing and one thing alone, and that is the shooter was not white. And therefore, those 4 lives, that 9-year-old boy who was shot to death by that man, are irrelevant to the left, to the anti-gunners out there, to the U.S. media, they are completely irrelevant. We can't stand on those bodies. We can't stand on their graves to get what we want politically because it shatters the other narrative. And that narrative is it's only white people who do this. That's how you knew what happened in Orange County wasn't a white man for a day and a half until they finally released the suspect. That's how you knew, because nobody was talking about it. MSNBC and others ran with this story. Another white guy attacking Capitol Police, must be a Trump supporter, yada, 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 yada. The shooting in Boulder, Colorado. It's an anti-mask, Trump-supporting white nationalist. No, Muslim Syrian migrant. Hated white people. But none of the people who spewed that stuff are ever going to pay a price. They're not going to pay a price politically if they were a politician. They're not going to pay a price socially if they're just some social commentator with a large following on social media. The social media platforms aren't even going to fact check or censor those posts that repeated those lies. They're not going to do that. And obviously, they're not going to pay a political price if they're a politician at all. It's just not going to happen. If they're news people, there's no professional price that they're going to pay. None of them are going to be suspended or talked to or demoted. There's going to be no retraining or re-education of how you conduct yourself on social media because you were running around spreading these lies. It just isn't going to happen because they have no shame. That's the world that we live in right now in the United States. If it's not news, it will be news if you can use it to damage white people and Republicans. And if it is news, but it doesn't damage white people and Republicans, it cannot be news. They're trying to foment this division. Charles Barkley is right. They are trying to foment this division. More coming up. Newstalk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.